A father's love is a powerful force, but is it powerful enough to shield his infant daughter from the world's cruelty? At 30,000 feet, imagine being trapped midair, facing unimaginable prejudice. Will justice prevail? For Marcus Thorne, a young black single father, a simple flight becomes a harrowing test of his spirit. He's exhausted, grieving, and just trying to get his baby girl home. But when a flight attendant with ice in her veins decides to make him her target, he's pushed to the brink. What she doesn't know is that the man she's humiliating is connected to the highest level of power in the airline. Get ready for a story of prejudice, power, and the moment one phone call changed everything. Hold on, what if one call could shatter a bully's world forever? The air in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was a familiar symphony of chaos. Announcements echoed in a perpetual overlapping loop. The squeak of suitcase wheels formed a constant rhythm section, and the low hum of thousands of conversations created a bed of white noise. For Marcus Thorne, it was all just static. The only sound that truly mattered was the soft, rhythmic breathing of the tiny human nestled against his chest. 6-month-old Lily was a bundle of warmth and impossibly soft skin, her tiny fingers curled around the collar of his gray t-shirt. She was the center of his universe, the anchor in the storm that his life had become. He gently rocked on the balls of his feet, his eyes scanning the departures board for gate F14. Flight 724 to London Heathrow, a 9-hour journey that felt like an eternity. Just a year ago, this trip would have been a joyous adventure. He and Maya had planned it all. A belated honeymoon and their first major trip together. They'd imagined showing their future child the world, starting with the historic streets of London. Now Maya was gone, taken by a swift and merciless complication after childbirth. And Marcus was left to navigate the world as a single father, a title he never wanted. Bearing a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. Lily was her mother's mirror. She had the same wide, curious eyes, the same hint of a dimple in her left cheek. Every time he looked at her, Marcus felt a painful mix of profound love and devastating loss. This trip wasn't a vacation. It was a promise. He was taking Lily to meet her grandmother, Maya's mother, for the first time. He was carrying his wife's legacy across the ocean. He carried a state-of-the-art diaper bag meticulously packed by his own mother and a small cooler bag with 4 pre-mixed bottles of Similac Pro Advanced chilled to the perfect temperature. He'd read every blog, watched every YouTube video on traveling with an infant. He was prepared for anything, or so he thought. The call to board for Stratos Airlines Premium Economy began. Marcus adjusted Lily in her carrier, grabbed his rolling carry-on, and joined the line. He felt the familiar subtle shift in the atmosphere as he moved through the crowd. The quick assessing glances, the way some people instinctively clutch their purses a little tighter. He was a tall, athletic black man with his hair in neat locks, wearing comfortable travel clothes. To many, he didn't fit the profile of a premium economy passenger, and certainly not that of a doing single father. He'd learned long ago to ignore it, to build a shell of indifference. As he reached the gate agent, a woman with a practiced, weary smile scanned his ticket. "Have a good flight, sir." He nodded gratefully. "Thank you." He walked down the jet bridge, the anticipation of the long flight settling in. At the aircraft door, 2 flight attendants greeted the arriving passengers. One was a young man with a warm, slightly nervous smile, who gave Lily a little wave. The other was a woman in her late 40s with blonde hair pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun. Her name tag read Susan. Her smile was a thin, tight line that didn't reach her eyes. When her gaze landed on Marcus, it lingered for a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of something cold and appraising in her look. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice clipped and professional, yet devoid of any warmth. She glanced at his carry-on. "That will need to fit completely under the seat in front of you or in the overhead bin. We need to keep the aisle clear." "Of course," Marcus replied, his voice even. "I know the drill." Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as if she'd taken his simple response as a challenge. He ignored it, moving past her into the cabin. He found his seat, 22C, an aisle seat in the small partitioned-off premium economy section. It was a small Mercy, offering a little extra legroom, which he knew he would need. He carefully settled in, unstrapping Lily from his chest and placing her gently in the bassinet the airline had provided, which clipped securely to the bulkhead in front of him. She stirred for a moment, her little mouth making sucking motions before settling back to sleep. A kind-faced older woman with silver hair who had the window seat leaned over. "Oh, she is just precious." "How old is she?" 6 months, Marcus said, a genuine smile finally breaking through his fatigue. "Her name is Lily." "Hello, Lily," the woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Gable whispered. "You are going to be a wonderful little traveler. I just know it." Her simple kindness was a balm, but the fragile peace was not to last. As the last of the passengers boarded, Susan made her way through the cabin, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning for any infraction. She stopped at Marcus's row. "Sir," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the cabin noise. "That diaper bag cannot stay on the seat next to you. The flight is full. It needs to go under the seat." Marcus looked at the empty middle seat. The app said this seat was unhooked. "I was hoping it would stay empty." "The flight is full," she repeated as if he were deaf. "It needs to be stowed now." He didn't argue. He compressed the bag and slid it under the seat in front of him next to the cooler. It was a tight fit. As he did, he felt Susan's eyes on him, a look of smug satisfaction on her face. It was a tiny thing, a minor inconvenience, but it was the first tremor of the earthquake to come. He was being watched, singled out. And as he looked at his daughter, sleeping so peacefully, a protective fire began to smolder within him. He just wanted to get through this flight. But a sinking feeling told him Susan was going to make that very, very difficult. The initial ascent was smooth. The lights of Atlanta dwindled into a glittering carpet below, and the plane settled into the deep, monotonous drone of cruising altitude. For the first hour, Lily was a perfect angel. She slept soundly in her bassinet, oblivious to the world around her. Marcus allowed himself a sliver of hope that the flight might pass without incident. He put on his headphones, leaning his head back and closing his eyes. Though he wasn't really listening to the music, his senses were on high alert, tuned to every potential whimper from his daughter. The first sign of trouble came when the seatbelt sign finally switched off. Lily began to stir, her peaceful sleep dissolving into fussy little whimpers. It was feeding time. Marcus, ever prepared, reached under the seat and pulled out the cooler bag, retrieving one of the pre-made bottles. He just needed some warm water to heat it. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood the bottle in hand, intending to walk back to the galley. As if summoned, Susan appeared, blocking the aisle with a drinks cart. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat," she said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "I will. I just need to get some hot water for my daughter's bottle," he explained calmly, holding it up for her to see. Susan glanced at the bottle with disdain. "We are about to begin cabin service. You'll have to wait." "It will only take a second," Marcus pressed, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Lily's whimpers were starting to crescendo. "She's getting hungry and all the other passengers are getting thirsty," Susan retorted, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. "Service will begin from the front of the cabin. We'll get to you eventually." She turned her attention to the passenger across the aisle, asking about a drink preference, dismissing Marcus completely. He stood there for a moment, feeling a hot flush of anger. It was a clear, deliberate obstruction. He saw the younger flight attendant, Leo, at the back of the galley, watching the exchange with a worried expression. Defeated for the moment, Marcus returned to his seat. Mrs. Gable gave him a sympathetic look. "Some people just don't have a maternal bone in their body, do they?" she murmured loud enough only for him to hear. Marcus gave a tight-lipped smile and tried to soothe Lily, who was now beginning to cry in earnest. Her cries were small at first, but they were gaining strength fueled by hunger. The sound drilled directly into Marcus' heart, a biological imperative to fix the problem. He felt dozens of eyes on him. He could hear a tut from a few rows back. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes, Leo appeared at his elbow. "Sir," he whispered, "if you give me the bottle, I can warm it up for you in the back galley quick." Marcus looked up. Immense gratitude washing over him. Thank you, really. He handed the bottle to Leo, who scurried away like a secret agent on a mission. A few minutes later, he returned with the bottle perfectly warmed. Susan can be a bit particular about procedures, Leo said apologetically. You're a lifesaver, Marcus said, and he meant it. Lily latched onto the bottle immediately, her cries ceasing as she drank greedily. The cabin returned to its hum. Marcus shot a glance towards the front where Susan was still serving drinks, pretending not to notice, but he saw her flick her eyes toward him. A flash of annoyance that he had circumvented her authority. She knew what Leo had done. An hour later, the second trial began. The unmistakable smell confirmed that Lily needed a diaper change. It was a big one. Marcus sighed, gathered the diaper bag, and carefully lifted his now drowsy daughter. He made his way towards the lavatories at the back of the premium economy cabin. He was intercepted again. Susan stood arms crossed outside the galley. The lavatories are being cleaned, she announced flatly. Both of them? Marcus asked incredulous. Yes, and the changing table in this one, she said, gesturing to the closest door, is out of service. Broken. A lie. He knew it was a lie with every fiber of his being. The sheer convenience of it was too perfect. When will they be available? When they're clean, she snapped. Return to your seat. You're blocking the aisle. I have to change my daughter, Marcus said, his voice low and steady, but now laced with steel. It's not something that can wait. And you can't do it here, she said, her voice rising slightly. It is unsanitary and against company policy to change an infant anywhere but a lavatory changing station. A perfect trap. He couldn't use the broken changing table. He couldn't use the being cleaned lavatory. And he couldn't change her at his seat. Susan had created an impossible situation designed to make him fail, to make him the problem passenger she clearly wanted him to be. So, what do you suggest I do? Marcus asked. His patience stretched to its breaking point. He held Lily a little tighter. The poor girl was starting to fuss again, uncomfortable in her soiled diaper. Susan gave a delicate theatrical shrug. Frankly, sir, that sounds like a personal problem of poor planning. You should have thought of that before you boarded. The insult, so condescending and personal, struck him like a physical blow. Poor planning. He had planned for every contingency except for a flight attendant engaged in a campaign of targeted harassment. Mrs. Gable, who had overheard the exchange, now stood up. That's an outrageous thing to say to this young man. He needs to care for his child. Can't you see that? Susan turned her icy glare on the older woman. Ma'am, I must ask you to return to your seat and let me handle this. This is a matter of airline safety and hygiene. She then turned back to Marcus. If you are unable to wait, we can discuss this with the purser when she is available. For now, you will go back to your seat. You are creating a disturbance. The word disturbance AST dregs of her courage. She approached his seat, her hands clasped in front of her, her head bowed. Mr. Thorne, she began, her voice, a hoarse, shaky whisper that was barely audible over the hum of the engines. I need to apologize. My behavior today was inexcusable. I don't know what came over me. I was having a bad day and I took it out on you. It was unprofessional and I am truly deeply sorry. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since the phone call. He saw no genuine remorse in her puffy eyes. He saw only the desperate animal fear of a person about to lose everything. Her apology was a hollow prepackaged script, a last-ditch effort to save her own skin. A bad day wasn't an excuse for calculated prejudice. Stress wasn't a justification for endangering the well-being of an infant. He looked down at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully against his chest, her tiny mouth slightly parted. He thought of the frantic, helpless feeling of her crying in his arms, her small body stiff with discomfort. He thought of the cold threat of being restrained, of being turned into a criminal for wanting to be a father. He looked back at Susan, his face an unreadable mask of calm. He let the silence stretch, forcing her to stand there in her self-made purgatory. Your apology, he said finally, his voice flat, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion, is noted. It was not forgiveness. It was not acceptance. It was a dismissal. It was the verbal equivalent of a clerk stamping a form, an acknowledgement that words had been spoken, but that they carried no weight, changed no facts, and offered no comfort. He was telling her that her apology was for her, not for him, and that he would not participate in her desperate attempt at self-preservation. The words hung in the air between them as the plane finally docked at the gate. A loud ping echoed through the cabin as the seatbelt sign was extinguished. For most passengers, it was a signal of arrival. For Susan Miller, the sound was a death knell. Her long, terrifying descent had just hit the ground. The moment the aircraft's main door hissed open, a starkly different reality imposed itself upon the stale, charged atmosphere of the cabin. A man in a sharply tailored Stratos Airlines executive suit, a uniform of a higher order, stepped aboard before the seatbelt sign had even been fully extinguished. He moved with an unhurried authoritative grace that instantly commanded the space. He was in his 60s with temples of distinguished gray and a face etched with genuine profound concern. He bypassed Maria's flustered, stammering attempt at a greeting as if she were merely part of the aircraft's fittings and made a direct unerring line for seat 22C. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that cut through the cabin's tension. "My name is Julian Croft. I am the Vice President of European Operations for Stratos. On behalf of our CEO, David Thorne, and with the full authority of the entire company, I want to offer you our most profound and unreserved apologies for the disgraceful treatment you and your daughter have endured on this flight." Every word was measured, sincere, and imbued with corporate weight. This was not the hollow, self-serving apology of a cornered flight attendant. This was the official voice of the corporation, bowing in contrition. Marcus, in the slow process of gathering his scattered belongings, looked up at the man and simply nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Croft." He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if watching a scene from a movie he happened to be in. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a vast, hollow exhaustion. "David asked me to personally escort you through the airport," Mr. Croft continued. His professional gaze softening with authentic human warmth as he looked at the sleeping Lily. "We are here to ensure you and your beautiful daughter have everything you need. A car is waiting to take you directly to your final destination." As Marcus stood carefully adjusting Lily in her carrier, Mr. Croft turned his attention to Maria and a now ghostly pale Susan, who seemed frozen to the galley floor. His calm demeanor vanished, replaced by a gaze as cold and hard as granite. "Miss Sanchez, Miss Miller," he stated, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register. "You will both report to the Stratos HR office in the main terminal building immediately upon clearing customs. Hand your crew identification to the ground supervisor at the gate. You are both suspended, effective immediately, pending a full and formal investigation into your conduct." The finality in his voice was absolute. A guillotine's swift clean fall. Susan let out a small strangled sob. A sound of utter despair. Maria, her face ashen, simply gave a sharp nod. Her career, her authority, her entire professional identity incinerating before her eyes. Mr. Croft then turned and with a practiced air addressed the stunned passengers of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we understand there was a deeply distressing incident on this flight. Stratos Airlines prides itself on the highest standards of safety and service. Standards that were clearly not met today. We sincerely apologize for any discomfort or anxiety this may have caused you. As a small gesture of our profound regret, Stratos Airlines will be issuing a full travel voucher equivalent to the value of your ticket to every passenger in this cabin. An email with the details will be sent to you within 24 hours. He then turned back to Marcus, the warmth returning to his eyes. "Sir, if you're ready." Marcus, with a quiet offer of help from Mrs. Gable, got Lily settled. The kind older woman squeezed his arm, her eyes shining. "You give that baby girl a kiss from me," she said, "and you tell your brother his airline is lucky to have a man like you holding it accountable. You'll force them to be better." "I will," Marcus promised, touched by her unwavering support. He and Mr. Croft were the first people off the plane, stepping out into the sterile bustle of Heathrow. They didn't walk towards the main concourse, but were guided through an unmarked door into the quiet carpeted corridors of the airport's inner sanctum. They bypassed the long winding immigration queues, were fast-tracked through a private channel, usually reserved for diplomats, and were met by another silent, efficient employee with their luggage, which had been handpicked from the carousel. The entire process was seamless, frictionless, a world away from the bureaucratic hell he had been subjected to on the plane. It was a demonstration of the company's power now wielded for him instead of against him. The promised car, a sleek black Mercedes S-Class, was waiting at a private exit. As they settled into the plush leather seats, Marcus felt the full weight of the past 9 hours descend upon him. He was a father who had just wanted to get his daughter safely to her grandmother. He hadn't asked for this fight. He hadn't wanted this surreal corporate chaperoned exit. During the silent, smooth drive to his mother-in-law's house in the Green Hills of Surrey, his phone rang. It was David. "How are you? Is Lily okay?" his brother asked, his voice strained with a mixture of rage and concern. "We're okay," Marcus said, watching the English countryside blur past. "Tired, but okay. Julian Croft is very professional." "He'd better be," David growled. "I read the preliminary report from Maria Sanchez and an official witness statement from Leo, the junior attendant. It was worse than you said, Marcus. The premeditation of it, the lies. I am sick about this, that this happened in my company, under my name, to my family. There are no words. It's not your fault, Dave. You can't control every employee." "The hell I can't." David shot back, his voice raw. "It is my fault. I'm the CEO. The culture starts with me. If a bigot like Susan Miller feels she has the license and the security to act like that on my watch, then I have failed in my most fundamental duty. And I am going to fix it. This isn't getting swept under the rug. This is getting put under a microscope." The promised investigation was swift and brutal. Leo's and Mrs. Gable's written testimonies were meticulous and damning, perfectly corroborating Marcus' account. They revealed a clear pattern of targeted harassment. Maria was found to have displayed a catastrophic failure of leadership, choosing to reflexively protect a toxic employee over ensuring passenger welfare and airline safety. Her record was reviewed. This wasn't the first complaint against Susan for rudeness and inflexibility, but it was by far the most egregious and the first to have such undeniable evidence. Maria Sanchez was demoted. She was stripped of her senior purser status, her wings clipped, and reassigned to short-haul domestic flights out of a minor hub, a public and permanent humiliation in the tight-knit world of cabin crew. Susan Miller was terminated for cause. Her career with Stratos Airlines, a job she had held for over 20 years, was over. The hard karma was not just the loss of her job, but the black mark that would follow her forever. The official letter of termination, which David insisted on reviewing personally, cited gross misconduct, willful endangerment of a minor, and discriminatory behavior in violation of company policy and international aviation standards. She would never work for a major airline again. Her small kingdom in the sky, built on a foundation of prejudice and petty tyranny, had been utterly and irrevocably dismantled. 2 weeks later, Stratos Airlines issued a formal press release. It didn't mention Marcus by name, but it detailed an unacceptable incident of passenger mistreatment and discrimination on a transatlantic flight and announced a new mandatory company-wide retraining initiative. It was a multi-million-dollar program developed with child welfare experts and diversity consultants focused on implicit bias, de-escalation, and comprehensive support for passengers traveling with infants and small children. In an internal memo to all 50,000 Stratos employees, David Thorne announced its name, the Lily Initiative. That evening, Marcus sat in the fragrant, quiet garden of his mother-in-law's home. The scent of English roses hung in the cool air. He held his own daughter, Lily, in his arms as she slept, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm of perfect peace. Her grandmother, a woman with Maya's kind eyes, sat beside them, her hand resting gently on his arm. He looked up at the twilight sky at a distant airplane tracing a silent silver line towards the horizon. He hadn't sought revenge. He had simply sought dignity. He had stood up to protect his child, and in doing so, to honor the memory of the wife who had so desperately wanted to show her the world. He hadn't realized that one act of quiet defiance could spark such a profound change, creating ripples that would hopefully make the skies a little kinder for the next father traveling alone, for the next family just trying to get home. The world had tested him in the cruelest way, in his moment of greatest vulnerability. But he had not been broken. He had protected his daughter, and in doing so, had found a new, deeper understanding of his own strength. The journey had been a descent into a nightmare. But here, in the peaceful English dusk, holding his daughter, he had finally found his dawn. This story is a stark reminder that one person's prejudice can have devastating consequences. But one person's courage can change the world for the better. Marcus Thorne wasn't looking for a fight. He was a grieving father trying to protect his child. But when pushed, he found a strength he didn't know he had. Not just for himself, but for everyone who has ever been made to feel small. The karma that found the flight attendant wasn't just about losing a job. It was about a system being forced to look at itself in the mirror and change. It's a testament to the power of dignity, the strength of family, and the fact that sometimes doing the right thing creates ripples you never expected. If this story of justice and resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to Dark Stories and turn on notifications for more powerful stories that matter.